my talk is Confucians and Daoists on minimal morality. Confucians and Daoists agreed about the sages being the most virtuous, possessing a kind of maximal morality, if you want. They make the best rulers and they're inspiring to the ordinary people. However, these traditions agree that the majority of people are unlike sages. They're somewhat moral, yet imperfectly virtuous, hence possessing a sort of minimal morality. Questions I ask in this essay are as follows. What's the accessibility of such a morality? How easy is it to access? And are there specific conditions such as political, social, cultural, and economic conditions that are necessary for having such a morality? And what's the relation between minimal morality and the moral principles of each? Comparing the Taoists and the Confucians, I ask which has a minimal morality that is easier to implement when the Tao is lacking, and which offers resources or more resources for one to become moral. Now, sages agree, Confucians and Daoists agree that sages possess all of the virtues, and wisdom is a virtue of knowing the way or the Tao that enables them to act morally in any situation. And they also hold that the Tao is the source of everything. So Mencius, for instance, talks about heaven as the Tao that gives birth to everything, and also prescribing a norm for everything. And for human beings, this norm happens to be the moral virtues. So specifically, each human being is endowed with a heart, mind, a Xin, that is made up of four incipient virtues of feelings: compassion, shame or disdain, reverence for elders, and the approval of what is right and disapproval of what is wrong. And when perfected, these feelings result in the virtues of humaneness, righteousness, ritual propriety, and wisdom, respectively. Now, Lao Tzu also offers us a view of the Tao that produces everything and nourishes them without contending with or discriminating against anything. So the sage then would behave in accord with the Tao, since the Tao already produces and nourishes everything. So the normative action would be that of wu wei, or non-action, that is effortless action, or not acting for a preconceived purpose. Now, comparing Mencius and Lao Tzu on knowledge of the Tao and virtue, for Mencius, knowledge of goodness or cheng, sincerity, is heaven's way and is the way for human beings to behave as well. And for Lao Tzu, that is knowledge of the Tao. And both of these thinkers also offer us a view of what is natural or nature. And we've seen that for Mencius, human nature stems from the Tao that also specifies the norm of the human being's morality. And for Lao Tzu, the Tao determines what is natural or the norm, 自然, what is spontaneous for everything it produces. So for instance, chapter 25 of the Tao Te Ching talks about the law of the way being the natural, the 自然. So for Lao Tzu, then knowing the Tao enables one to know the 自然 and ultimately to act like the Tao in benefiting everything. Now, such a sense of cosmic action in the Tao Te Ching is also present in the Mencius, as he tells us that all 10,000 things are perfect bay in us. Now, nevertheless, these thinkers disagree about the Tao and knowledge. Mencius talks about using the specific faculty of the heart mind, the Xing, to reflect on one's innate nature, yielding the norm of acting according to the four virtues. Whereas the Tao Te Ching would insist that the Tao is neither specific nor accessible by the Xing, and reason because the Tao is supposedly invisible, intangible, inaudible, formless, indistinct, and so forth. So one cannot see or reflect on the Tao because it is formless and indistinct. And if one were to try to reflect on the Tao, Lao Tzu says that it would be like forcing things in chapter 55. Rather, Wu Wei is the perfect way for the sages to behave, and this is contrasted with the pursuit of learning. And we know that for the Confucians, the love of learning is important and very significant. And Mencius talks about ruling by the kingly way, whereby the king is supposed to provide village schools in order to educate the people into filial piety and righteousness. In short, cultivation is of the utmost importance for the Confucians in acquiring the virtues, whereas the Tao Te Ching would say that it's only when the Tao is absent that there'll be talk of virtues. So these traditions differ in trying or no trying when it comes to the pursuit of virtues. Mencius and Confucius favoring the active pursuit, whereas Lao Tzu would talk about abandoning the pursuit of virtues. And for the Confucians, they would expect active cultivation of the virtues by the rulers, whereas Lao Tzu would talk about how when the sages act effortlessly, the people would transform themselves. Now, these thinkers, Mencius and Lao Tzu, also agree about the innate goodness of the sages, how it is that the great man is he who does not lose his infant heart, for Mencius, and for Lao Tzu, he who contains great virtue, is like an infant. So for Lao Tzu then, being like a child is like returning home to the infinite, which is really another way of referring to the Tao because it is indistinct and formless. So for Lao Tzu, the ideal of the ruler is to make the people children-like, to weaken the people's commitments and strengthen their bones so that they're without any knowledge or desire. So we find in Lao Tzu a distinction between maximal and minimal morality, in that the sages are the wise ones who have knowledge about the constant Tao, hence are able to enact wise actions. And the commoners, in contrast, do not need to know the Tao in order to behave morally. So people don't need the sacred's wisdom. All they need to do is to be kept ignorant of conventional distinctions, which would only lead them to act unjustly. Now, the question then is whether there is this sense of minimal morality in Confucianism, since they advocate the pursuit of humaneness as the highest virtue, and this is Ren that can be cultivated by all human beings. And there is this sense, because Confucius says, quote, the common people, Ming, can be made to accord with the Tao, but cannot be made to know it, end quote. So in general, the Confucians distinguish between the sages and the commoners. And I think the difference between them is that of desires. Whereas Lao Tzu would say that desires limit people and make them immoral and act unjustly toward each other. The Confucians would say that desires are required. People must have specific desires, say, to be like the sages in order to become virtuous. And I trace their different accounts of desire and the rest of their views to their different first principles. So for Lao Tzu, the Tao is totally formless, whereas for Mencius, the Tao is heaven, which is defined specifically as sincerity, which is being knowledgeable about the good. So whereas Lao Tzu would say that the norm is for the rulers to rule by Wu Wei, for the Confucians, the sages inspire the people by modeling ritual propriety. And I don't need to go into details about the Confucian rituals, but rather that just to say that they start in the family and are to be extended into the larger community. And when it comes to these rituals, it's not just going through the motions, but it's important to have the sincerity of attitudes and emotions when expressing respect, as well as being fully invested and present when performing them. So Mencius, for instance, talks about the virtues of humaneness and righteousness being adorned by the ritual propriety, and also music. Li and Yue, ritual propriety and music, go together because in the performance of these rituals, one actually takes delight in one's actions. So it is the joy that inspires people to aspire to filial piety and desire the virtues from ritual proprieties. So evaluating these two traditions, I want to say that Taoism offers a more minimal morality in that all the sages need to do is to eliminate the conventional knowledge about different values and desires so that they don't need to do anything else to get the people to behave morally, as long as they are not tempted by their desires and the value of different things. They won't contend with each other and act immorally. So without preferences, not valuing certain goods, lacking specific desires, they'll act justly and treat everyone morally. Now, the shortcoming I find in Lao Tzu's minimal morality is that the burden then rests entirely on the sage ruler. Lacking such a ruler, the people could easily be misled by corrupt rulers and end up being immoral as well. Now, the Confucians, I think, require more of their people than just ignorance in their minimal sense of morality. They insist on rituals to cultivate their morals. And the sages, in addition, must provide economic, cultural, and model resources, as well as model the rituals to inspire them. Now, the Confucians don't require perfect virtues from the people to behave morally. They offer resources like friends and sages to inspire people to become more moral. And they also have the alternative of abstaining or withdrawing from a service in a corrupt government. They talk about how one is capable of becoming Ren or humane by oneself just by sincerely and resolutely cultivating oneself. And besides, imperfect people can associate with the more perfect to cultivate their virtues. So, in conclusion, Lao Tzu offers a more minimal morality compared to the Confucians, but to enact that minimal morality, maximal perfection is required in the ruler. If not, the people could succumb to corruption. The Confucians offer more resources for imperfect conditions so that even in those conditions, people can progress toward a maximal morality. Thank you.